realfaith.org.au.
This morning we were going to church and she was just walking into church and all of a sudden she went blue and she said, "I feel faint." And she lurched forward into my arms and we didn't realise that a blood clot had developed, which they say was about 9 inches. It had travelled through her heart and into her lungs, which caused cardiac arrest. And this is a serious situation medically and not many survive.
Welcome to Real Faith. Conversations about the impact faith has on our lives and the challenges we go through. Helping us today and giving us hope for tomorrow. That's real people, real life and real faith with Eric Scatterbo.
In 2004, Ken and Lyn Overton's life suddenly changed as a result of Lyn having a broken leg. Her broken leg activated a blood clot, which then led to several life-threatening health issues. The doctors actually reported that Lyn was medically dead for over 30 minutes. Her survival is nothing short of a miracle.
Lyn shouldn't be alive today. When I first arrived at the church, basically was clinically or medically dead. No pulse, no breathing, fixed dilated pupils, and the length of time that she'd been unconscious was quite considerable. So at that stage, I could have said, "Sorry, she's gone," and issued a death certificate.
Then, 5 years later, Ken was diagnosed with a serious health issue of his own, and he was on life support for nearly 4 months in ICU and a total of 8 months in hospital. Once again, his survival is nothing short of a miracle. So, by all rights, both of them should not be with us today, but we are so glad that they are and that they'll be sharing their miraculous stories with us today. Welcome to the program, Ken and Lyn Overton.
Thank you, Eric.
Eric.
Good to be with you.
So glad to have you with us, and you're joining us from Tasmania, is that right?
Yes, we are. That's the cold part of Australia, as everybody knows, Tasmania in the south. And we're actually in Devonport, and that's where most would know the spirit of Tasmania comes.
That's right. So you're in your home, and I'm able to look at you through the miracle of Zoom as well. And before we get into your stories, I just wanted to say that before these health challenges happened to both of you, you were married several years, and Ken, I heard you say once that you only saw Lyn sick in bed once in 29 years before that. Is that right?
That's right. We'd been married 29 years, and it was incredible just how well Lyn was and had kept in that time. And so it was quite a shock to have this take place in our life.
Yeah, so we should say you were married in 1975. A little bit of background, you have 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter, and 15 grandchildren. Is that right?
16.
16. Oh, okay. I must have gotten some old information there. So married in 75, and then in 2004 is when the health issues for Lyn began. So we're going to get to that, but first we want to go back in time and find out a little bit about both of your backgrounds. Ken, we'll start with you. Where were you born and raised?
Yeah, I was born in Devonport, and so I've been here all my life, but certainly had the opportunity to have a bit of a look around, haven't just stayed here.
Oh, and tell us about your family growing up. What was it like?
Well, I felt very privileged to have parents who were Christians, and they always showed plenty of love to us. I'm very grateful as I look back now. At the time, you don't think about it quite the same, but, they took us to church every Sunday. They probably treated it a little bit like as if you have your breakfast. You don't necessarily ask your family, do you want breakfast? But we'd get up in the morning and away we'd go to church as a family.
So that was just regular part of your family life, going to church. And did you eventually become a Christian yourself?
Yeah, I did. I realised growing up that their faith, my parents' faith, wasn't for me. I had to make a personal decision.
Okay, and before we get to your adult life, anything else about your childhood that has had a lasting impact on you?
Well, one of the things that did have an impact and certainly was a great help in considering what we'd been through in our health challenges was my younger sister had a hole in the heart, and she had an operation at 6 years of age, and she didn't come through. She passed away.
Oh, okay.
And I always remember how my parents handled that, and that they indicated to us that, the death is very much part of life, but God has it all in hand. And also just before my father passed away, he made a comment to me as children, you've all had it pretty easy, but wanted me to know it may not always be that easy in life. And I often wish I could perhaps talk to him now because he was quite true about that.
And did you have any health challenges yourself growing up?
No, none at all. No, we were completely free of any health challenges, both Lyn and I, and the children as well. So we were very grateful for all of that time.
And then tell us about your work life. What did you do for a living?
Yes, well, my father was a fibrous plaster manufacturer, and so I did my apprenticeship with him. And when I just finished after 5 years, he had a massive heart attack. And as a result, he had to retire. And Dad suggested that I ought to start my own business, and particularly as I had the opportunity to be a CSR gyprock plasterboard distributor. It was quite a challenge to be self-employed at 19 years of age.
19? Wow.
So it sort of threw me in the deep end a bit.
Yeah.
But it was better for Dad to get himself well.
Now, we should say that your business has gone on to be very, very successful.
Well, I'm very grateful for where it went and what happened. And we were operating on the northwest coast of Tasmania and into Launceston, and also been involved in property development and investment.
So you've gone on to have a very successful career with your own business. How did you eventually meet Lyn?
Yes, well, I was away in Melbourne for a weekend and I came home and my brother said, I think I've found your wife. And I thought, well, he wouldn't be able to determine that. And so anyway, I thought, I should go and check out this lady that he reckons he's met, which was at a youth group. And so that was down in Burnie. And so I went with him to the youth group and, I could see what he meant. I could see there was potential.
One of the few
there.
times that you probably agreed with your brother.
Yeah, but anyway, so he prides himself a little bit in that he found my wife for me. But, I could see what he meant. And, of course, it developed from there, which is great. And I'm very thankful for her.
Okay, well, at this point, we'll switch over to you, Lyn. Lyn, tell us about your background. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Burnie on the northwest coast, not far from Devonport. So I had a good family. I had loving parents and they were also Christians, which was great. So faith was a part of my family.
Wow, so you're both from Christian families.
Yes. I was about 9 years old when I became a Christian, when I realised that I was a sinner in God's sight.
Okay, and let's hear your side of meeting Ken. How did you meet him?
Well, I was at the youth group, which was in a home, and Ken turned up with his brother Colin.
And you thought it was him that was interested, didn't you?
Oh, because Colin had been asking questions about me before he brought Ken along, so I assumed that, but it wasn't. It was Ken, so that was good.
Okay, so now you're in your early 20s when you first meet. Well, how old were you both when you met?
Oh, I was 17 when I met Ken.
Okay.
And I was very concerned about her age when I found out because she was quite mature. And I thought, this has probably got to end because I was 23. But anyway, I thought, no, it'll be okay. Eventually we continued on.
Okay, so at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're married, you have a tremendously successful business, health is good, everything is looking fine. 2004 comes, and then Lyn breaks her leg. Is that right? Is that kind of setting up what happened in 2004?
That's exactly right. And so that she breaks her leg, and that was a big thing for me to start with because all of a sudden I was put in the zone of helping and doing a lot more in the home.
Being a carer?
Lyn was the responsibility of business I took care of. The responsibility of home, Lyn was brilliant and did what she did with all the children, bring them up. And so I had a fair bit to learn and adjust to in the same way for Lyn to actually be cared for a bit, just even with the broken leg. I remember one time I was hanging out the washing and it was a shirt that I was hanging up and I thought to myself, I'll just clip it on the shoulder bits. And I thought I'd done a great job because I thought it could just flap in the wind. So when I went back inside, Lyn was there with her broken leg and I just said, I've just found out a really good way to hang shirts up, Dale. I said, if you hook it up on the sleeve, then it'll just flap in the wind. And she turned around and made the comment, well, what do you think I've been doing for 30 years? So.
Well, you had to have your first time, I guess. So interestingly, you had been a businessman, you're used to taking care of the business, but now all of a sudden you're doing some of the domestic chores.
Yeah, that's right. It had changed, but little did I realise it was about to change a little bit more.
Our guests today are Ken and Lyn Overton, whose near-perfect lives changed in an instant when they were struck down with prolonged, life-threatening illnesses 5 years apart. However, as we'll hear, God intervened in a series of remarkable and unprecedented events that had even the medical profession using the word miracle. We'll hear more of their incredible story when we return right here on Real Faith.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
You're listening to Real Faith, conversations with real people about how God works in their lives. If you want to know more about integrating faith into your life, our website is realfaith.org.au. Just go to the website and you'll find helpful articles about the impact faith can have on your life. Once again, that's realfaith.org.au.
Welcome back. I'm Eric Scadabo, and today I'm chatting with Ken and Lyn Overton, who have both survived near-death health issues 5 years apart. The Overtons are joining us from their home in Tasmania, having lived and worked in Devonport all their lives. Ken is well known in the business community there through his property developments and former gyprock plasterboard business. Before the break, we heard how they met and married. Now we'll hear what happened next in their lives after Lyn broke her leg in 2004. So it's not too uncommon for people to break a leg, but it is pretty uncommon for it to go from a broken leg to some life-threatening issues. How did it change? How did it progress?
Yeah, well, she only had a week to go to get the cast off her leg. So that was something we were really looking forward to. And this morning we were going to church, and she was just walking into church, and all of a sudden she went blue, and she said, "I feel faint." And she lurched forward into my arms. And I had a flashback to a guy who died at Ayers Rock several years ago before that. And this guy said, "My word, it's hard." And he just passed away at my feet. Couldn't.
Wow. Right in front of you.
Just right in front of me. And so it felt like that. And I've often wondered if I needed to have that flashback, because I realised the seriousness of Lyn's situation. Because when I lay her on the floor, I really could see that it was her last breath. There was no breathing, no pulse.
Lyn, what do you recall of this time?
The last thing I recalled was telling Ken that was everything going black, and then telling Ken that I felt faint.
So
and that was it until I woke up in the hospital. So
before this, everything was just going fine. You broke your leg, and as far as you knew, you were just going to recover and life would go on. But then all of a sudden this happened?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, we didn't realise that a blood clot had developed, which they say was about 9 inches. It had travelled through her heart and into her lungs, which caused cardiac arrest. And this is a serious situation medically. We've found out since, and not many survive.
So what happened? This is at church, right?
Yeah, so she was just there on the floor, and amazingly, a nurse who had just come to church for the first time, she was there, and she went straight to her side, and I had the audacity to say to her husband, "Does she know what she's doing?"
Well, I mean, at the time, you don't know her qualifications, right? So, I mean, it's kind of understandable.
Well, the thing now I've learnt from that is that how grateful, because I understand that with Lyn's situation, if she hadn't have had the CPR, in 4 minutes she would have been brain dead.
Oh, wow. So her being there was
saved
crucial.
her from being brain dead.
Oh, wow. Okay, so now take us back to what I'm assuming you're like in the church lobby or something?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So she's on the floor in the church lobby. Fortunately, this nurse is there to do CPR.
That's right.
Then what happened?
So they worked on her as she was working on her, and then a doctor who had only been coming to church for 2 weeks tells the story that he came early that morning
Oh,
and
wow.
he assisted her until the paramedics arrived.
So just the right people were there.
At the right time, it seems now. Yeah,
Wow.
that's right. And during that time, there was no response. There was no pulse. She had a fixed dilated pupil. He's recorded that he believes she was clinically medically dead
Right there.
right there, and he
Wow.
should have issued me a death certificate. And amazingly, she groaned a little bit, and the paramedics then arrived at that point, and so they got very busy to take her then out to the hospital.
So there was still some hope at that point.
Well, when she moved, after about 40 minutes, they wanted to give her another chance, and so they said that she was arresting all the way to the hospital.
Arresting? What does that mean?
Well, she was still cardiac arresting with her heart. The blockage was there with this clot. And so they decided, because she was going to die if they didn't do this, so they decided to give her a clot-busting drug to endeavour to break the clot up and to save her life. Now, a very small percentage of people have a side effect of this severe drug, causing a bleed in the brain, and that's what happened to Lyn. She bled in her brain and then suffered a severe stroke which paralysed her down the right-hand side. And this started on an unknown journey then in hospital for 4 months.
Wow. So suffering a stroke, did you have any idea what to expect, what the future would be like with Lyn?
Well, the first night she was fighting for her life, even on life support with all of that. It was a difficult time, thinking about the possibility of her not coming through. And that was a time when God was very close to me and challenging me as well. First of all, I was thinking about the fact that I wasn't able to say goodbye, just how quick that was, that I may have lost her. It was so sudden and unexpected. And if she passed away, how life would change.
And then also I understand that you had a bit of an argument that morning.
Yes, well, I was going to get to that. We did. Yes, and I can remember driving in and I wanted to put my hand on her knee and I thought, no, I'm not. But I tell you what, when she was fighting for her life, I wish I could have then. And, I was being challenged about the fact that your life can change very quickly.
Yeah, here we squabble over little things, and then all of a sudden you realize how insignificant they are in the big picture.
Exactly, when it comes to life and death.
Yeah, yeah.
But God got my attention that day, and it was probably because it's really the first time in my life that I didn't feel I could control a situation.
Yeah, like you're a businessman. You're used to controlling things.
Well, from 19 years of age, you make decisions all the time, and you're resolving conflict, you're resolving issues. But this time, I felt my absolute dependence on God for life as to whether Lyn was going to live or she was going to die. And he brought me to a place of full surrender. It was a bit like Jesus when he said, not my will, but yours be done. If it's possible, could he be not have to go to the cross? But he said, it's not possible. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And so I sensed God even saying to me there, what would you think even if she was physically disabled, didn't know you, in a wheelchair for the rest of her life? But he got me to surrender to him completely, whether she lived or died. And giving over to God that brought me an amazing peace in my heart, which is hard to explain, but letting go and trusting him with the outcome. Little did I realise all of that actually helped me make a decision in regards to life support. The intensivist at the hospital confirmed that she'd had a stroke, was bleeding heavily in her brain. The pressure and swelling on the brain bleeding, they explained, can push down on the spinal cord and cause instant death. So really, she needs the opportunity to see a neurosurgeon if she's going to live anyway, and that would be in Hobart. The problem was the timing in relation to whether there'd be a flight available, the area ambulance, and how to transport her. They explained if she was to go by car, that she just wouldn't make it in time to have this opportunity, because they were looking at, or little did I know at that stage, but they were looking at taking out a piece of her skull, which they then allowed the bleeding pressure on the brain to reduce.
Wow, so at this point, it's really touch and go. I mean, you could lose your wife at any moment.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because of those two reasons, the bleeding was still happening. So anyway, I asked him, the intensivist, would he wait? Because I'd like to just pray with my family and the guidance about what to do. And we had a bit of a chat about the possibilities and what could be. And anyway, we decided to go ahead and give Lyn every opportunity. So we went back into the intensivist, and he was walking towards me and looking very positive. He said, first of all, I've just rang the neurosurgeon in Hobart who's agreed to assess Lyn, because sometimes they won't take them in that situation because of the possibilities of disability and whatever after an operation. He said if he's just been in theatre, and so he would hold them there to see Lyn and assess her if they agreed they'd need to get her in the air ambulance to be available in that time. And he said, I can't believe it. I've just found out that the air ambulance has arrived at Devonport to take another man to Melbourne for a heart issue.
So the very air ambulance that you're wanting to come to there is already there.
Is already there.
Yeah.
And he said, there's the stretcher, which is going to take the man to Melbourne, but Lyn will be on that in 5 minutes and go and be on her way to Hobart straight away. So as a family, we're driving down, we arrived and we were greeted with the confirmation that Lyn was still bleeding heavily in her brain, which was causing extensive damage. And then he explained to us that he could do surgery immediately, take out the piece of skull. I asked him, what do you do with that? And he says, oh, that goes in the fridge for about a month. It allows her bleeding to subside and the pressure on the brain to be reduced. But he said, you need to know if we do nothing, without a miracle, she will not live past a couple of hours. But if we do surgery, she may not live either. But most likely she could. But in living, you need to know, because of the brain injury, she'll most likely be in a vegetative state, not able to walk again, no peripheral vision, not able to communicate, and most likely won't know you.
Wow.
And that's where I've since realised that if you're brain dead, well, that's not easy. This decision was a hard one because you're dealing with the quality of life. But the worst thing was, he said to me, what do you think Lyn would want? Well, of course, you don't sit down at the kitchen table and talk about those decisions. Thankfully, the Lord, I believe, worked on me a few days before to do all we could and to trust him no matter what with the outcome. So we sort of said, let's go ahead and do the surgery. So they went and did that, and she came through after a long night. And we didn't know.
It doesn't sound like you had a lot of good options at that point.
Well, not at all. I mean, we could have probably just turn the machine off and she wouldn't have lived. But because God challenged me about trusting him no matter what, we came to that point of being prepared for that. And we didn't know what the outcome would be in relation to her body functions. But anyway, she came through the surgery, and we're very grateful for the medical profession and the God-given gift that they have.
And what was your prayer at that point?
Again, just relying totally on God, knowing that we just can't control the outcome. But the amazing thing is, a few days later, I was experiencing the love of God as a father like never before, just like him being there with me. And he was saying to me, I sensed him saying to me, I am your father and you are my child, and I care deeply about you. And it was like he was saying to me, what would you like of Lyn? And again, I was going back to that other moment the first night, that no, Lord, you're asking me, but I've surrendered her to you, whether she lives or whether she dies and what the outcome is. Ask what you want and you can receive. So I just felt that sense, that real sense I was to ask him, well, if nothing else, can she know us? Could she communicate with us so that we have her as normal as possible? If there's some physical disability, well, don't like it, but, at least if she would know us. And the amazing thing is at this point to say, because of the side that Lyn had the stroke, the speech therapist has made it very clear to us several times, Lyn just should not even be talking the way she is.
Yeah.
And, I don't see Lyn's personality any different now after all this time. And she communicates well, and she she can say what she needs to say, and everything's great.
Yeah, miraculous.
So what I asked for, I sometimes think I should have asked for more.
Well, that was part one of my conversation with Ken and Lyn Overton, whose near-perfect lives changed in an instant when they were struck down with prolonged, life-threatening illnesses 5 years apart. Today, we mainly focused on Lyn's health issues. Next time, we'll hear about her miraculous recovery and about Ken's near-death health issues 5 years later. That's all coming up next time. But before we end today, I just want to recap what happened to Lyn in 2004. After she collapsed at the church, she was clinically dead for over 30 minutes when a blood clot broke free from her broken leg, punched through her heart, and lodged in her lungs, causing cardiac arrest, which basically means her heart stopped. She was taken to the hospital and en route suffered another arrest and yet another one on arrival. She then had a bleed in her brain, which caused a stroke. Medical staff at the hospital gave her little hope of survival, yet Lyn not only survived, but was spared the anticipated serious brain damage. We'll hear more about these incredible events next time when we hear more of Ken and Lyn Overton's story. Until then, I'm Eric Scatterbo. So long, and God bless.
You've been listening to Real Faith, and if you have any questions or comments, you can send us a message through our website, realfaith.org.au. That's realfaith.org.au.
Real Faith is a production of Vision Christian Media.
This program is a production of Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, see vision.org.au.